at 5 along the banks of the Mississippi River in Minneapolis. The sun just dropping below the horizon at this hour as we enter the season of the early standard time sunsets. It was a balmy October day, something of a reprieve as the cloudy weather we'd expected held off for another day, but never fear. A large winter storm is building up in the Rockies. It's headed our way, and Dan Carlson will be along with us a bit later for all those details. 50 years ago today, well, the weather was an afterthought. The nation consumed by the sudden crash of the stock market, a day when instant millionaires were transformed into instant paupers. It was a day of chaos at the country's financial heart, a day to be known even 50 years later as Black Tuesday. A bit later in the 5 p.m. report, we'll discuss that day in the Twin Cities. But first, let's go down to the newsroom now and Ron Handberg for other stories making news on this day at this hour. Ronald?
Skip, the power line dispute has been out of the public eye for a while, but it was back today with a protest at the United Power Association in Elk River. We'll take you there later. And we'll have more on the stadium petition drive and more on that dispute between rival blind organizations, which was back in court today. And we'll have the first in a week-long series of interviews with the candidates for mayor of Minneapolis. Today, Charles Stenvig talks about the issues. All that and more, Skip, a bit later coming up.
But first, there was a robbery at Southdale this morning. A solitary gunman posing as a security officer robbed the Southdale Goodman jewelry store of an undisclosed amount of diamond jewelry this morning, shortly before the store opened. The man who entered as the employees came to work bound 4 employees with tape, cleaned out most of the diamonds, and then left. The manager, Sam Marston, alerted police after struggling 10 minutes to try to break free. Store employees described the gunman as a white male, 5 feet 10 inches tall, weighing 170 pounds, brown hair, a full beard. He wore glasses, a brown leather coat, and a checked hat. Edina police have announced a crime fund reward of up to $1,000 for information leading to the robber's arrest. Viewers with information should call the Edina Crime Fund at 926-1246. You may remain anonymous. A 5-car accident took place at the intersection of Girard Avenue and Broadway this afternoon. The accident took place as Minneapolis police were in pursuit of a stolen white Cadillac. 3 squad cars chased the stolen car down Girard when it hit 2 other cars, causing a chain reaction crash involving the 4th and 5th autos. 4 people injured in the accident were taken to North Memorial, where they were treated and are listed in satisfactory condition. A 5th was taken to the Hennepin County Medical Center and is said to be now in serious condition. Wall Street action. The coalition of anti-nuclear groups protesting today in New York failed in its effort to stop the stock market activity, but large numbers of demonstrators were arrested. Here's that story from New York.
The anti-nuclear demonstrators who formed a coalition called Wall Street Action were on hand early today to form ranks in their attempt to prevent stock market employees and brokers from getting inside the exchange. But generally, they failed. The market opened on time and operated normally. However, throughout the day, more than 850 of the demonstrators invited arrest by sitting or lying in the path of business people passing through police lines. This after police on horseback attempted to force the demonstrators away. But before long, many of the arrested were back in the area, listening to entertainment with an anti-nuclear beat, and trying to make their point that investment in companies involved in nuclear technology is harmful to the country because they said nuclear power plants are unsafe and nuclear weapons inhuman. About 850 police were on hand, double the number called out to keep order 50 years ago today when the stock market suffered its worst crash in history. Mitchell Krause, CBS News, New York.
For those of you who were alive 50 years ago, this is a day that lodged in the collective memory, a day remembered by Twin Cityans as well as those who watched the crash on Wall Street. More now from Ron Handberg in the newsroom. Ron?
Skip, Barb Brown has spent her day tracking down some of the local businessmen whose lives were touched by the crash and asking them to dust off their memories and go back a half a century. Barb, do the people you talk to remember the crash vividly? I suspect they do.
Yes, the people I talk to certainly do remember the crash, particularly 2 of them, one of whom was a salesman for Lane, Piper & Jaffrey, the firm that is now Piper, Jaffrey & Hopwood, and he is still there as a consultant vice president. And the other was a senior vice president of the First National Bank in Minneapolis when the crash happened.
What were they doing? men whose lives were touched by the crash, and asking them to dust off their memories and go back a half a century. Barb, do the people you talk to remember the crash vividly? I suspect they do.
Yes, the people I talk to certainly do remember the crash, particularly two of them, one of whom was a salesman for Lane, Piper & Jaffrey, the firm that is now Piper, Jaffrey & Hopwood, and he is still there as a consultant vice president. And the other was a senior vice president of the First National Bank in Minneapolis when the crash happened.
What were they doing in 1929? In the opening, their early careers in the market, obviously.
Right. Well, one was apparently pretty far along in his career at that point. He was duck hunting the day that he got word of the crash and said he came back very quickly to find mass confusion when he got back. So.
How about the other?
The other was in his office, and he also said there was just a whole lot of confusion at the time.
He stayed away from the window.
Right, exactly. That's right.
I know you've been talking to people today trying to analyze a little bit of the stock market of 50 years ago and today. What are some of the things they're telling you about the market today that would prevent another 1929?
Well, Sumner Whitney, who is with Piper, Jaffrey & Hopwood, was telling me of some of the safeguards. For example, the margin for buying stock is a whole lot different today. There's a 50% margin, meaning you have to put up 50% of the money in order to buy stocks. Back then it was 10%, so people just kept buying. They felt they could afford it. They're also selling stocks closer to their value rather than selling them at a much higher value than they're actually worth. But another thing is the communications have improved so much since then. It took hours on that day for people to get the information they needed and wanted. And now, of course, we can get pretty instant communications.
I assume they got a lot of bad information in those days, too.
Quite possibly, right.
Okay. Barb will have more at 6, and we'll let you meet some of these people she's been talking about, Skip.
Okay, Ron. Ray Brady now compares the symptoms of the Wall Street rush of the 20s with the current situation.
This being the 50th anniversary of the great stock market crash, many Americans are asking, how could it have happened? How could that other generation of Americans have bid stock prices up to such dizzying heights they had to collapse? The answer probably is one for psychologists, not economists, because that other generation was swept by one idea that all Americans were destined to be rich. The New York Times on the first day of 1929 showed that the price of General Electric over the previous year had gone from $136 a share to $221 a share, a gain of 62.5%. And Chrysler had done even better, rising more than 125%. So Americans said, invest in stocks. The numbers show you'll get rich. If that seems incredible, look at a later generation of Americans. In 1976, the price of gold dropped as low as $101 an ounce. By late 1979, investors stampeded into it, pushing the price up by 332% over that earlier price. Closer to home, no pun intended, all Americans will tell you the way to get rich is to buy a home, and they'll cite the figures. The average home cost $38,900 5 years ago. Now it's $73,700, a gain of more than 89%. The trouble is, all these price spirals end in just one way, a fall that leaves a lot of people hurt.
I know you're watching TV right now, but I'd like to tell you about a radio station. A station that plays some very beautiful music. Right here at Stereo 102 Key FM. Key FM has a beautiful way with music that helps you relax when you want to. So when you want to relax, you listen to me. And listen to KEEY FM 102, the place to relax.
Gertrude!
Round the corner from the Jolly Green Giant.
Gertrude! I swapped recipes with the giant.
Oh?
He makes delicious lasagna.
We make lasagna.
Oh, the Green Giant makes lasagna with 4 flavorful cheeses. Good ground beef and tangy tomato sauce. It bakes up crisp on top, delicious through and through.
And he swapped his recipe?
Uh-huh. He even let me keep ours.
Ho, ho, ho. Green Giant.
Last year, Dan Turley offered Pam Brooks 4 baseball cards in exchange for a box of plump and delicious Sun-Made raisins. She refused, politely. This year, Dan offered Pam half as many cards for the same amount of juicy Sun-Made raisins, and she accepted, willingly, which means that Pam's regard for Dan has gone way up, or this year, the price of America's favorite raisin has come way down.
Well, the stadium bond issue goes on and on and on. 7,700 signatures needed on a petition to force a vote by the Minneapolis residents on a charter amendment, a vote which could overturn action of the Minneapolis Council in adopting the lodging and liquor taxes to pay off the stadium bonds and then, of course, possibly kill the stadium. Today, State Senator Jack Davies appeared at the Minneapolis City Clerk's office with petitions containing 4,600 signatures, far more than he needs. Davies originally filed petitions October 4th, but fell short by 1,700 names. The names on today's petition are now being checked. If 37% of them are acceptable, a special election will have to be called within 90 days. In Elk River today, protesters picketed the United Power Association, the cooperative responsible for construction of the power line. They accused the UPA of mismanagement. They re-emphasized their belief that the power line is a health hazard. A year ago today, 20 protesters arrested at the UPA converter station near Delano. Those that gathered today praised the 20 and vowed to continue their protest until that power line comes down. There was another courtroom skirmish today in the ongoing battle between the National Federation for the Blind and the Minneapolis Society for the Blind. More on that story from Ron.
Skip, as you may recall, there was a court ruling on Friday which prevented the Minneapolis Society for the Blind from publishing certain ads which are part of a campaign heading toward...
More on that story from Ron.
Skip, as you may recall, there was a court ruling on Friday which prevented the Minneapolis Society for the Blind from publishing certain ads which are part of a campaign heading toward a November 14th election. That election to determine which group will be spokesmen and advocates for blind people in Minnesota. Donna Vogt has been following the latest action in that controversy today. And Donna, I guess the question is, what's at stake here in this fight?
Well, as you said, the November 4th election will determine who has control over the Minneapolis Society, and there are 2 organizations that want that control, the Minneapolis Society for the Blind and the National Foundation of the Blind of Minnesota. It's very important for them to have control since this is the major organization representing the blind in Minnesota. And the Minneapolis Society for the Blind had initiated a roughly $20,000 campaign. That's a rough estimate, but it's according to authorities over there, it's somewhere in that area. In the ads that they ran, they made claims that if the Federation would have control over the society, blind people will be put out in the streets. They'll be jobless, tapping the streets of Hennepin Avenue. The Federation took them to court, and over the last 8 years, that has been kind of the scene between those 2 organizations is a lot of court action. They said the ads were false and misleading, and today in the court hearing, Judge Kantorowicz of the Hennepin County District Judge asked both sides to draw up briefs on the constitutionality of fair comment and free speech, which they will have another hearing on Wednesday about that. The problem is the 2 groups' major differences in their philosophy toward the people who are blind. The Federation saying that blindness is an inconvenience, and the society saying that blindness is a severe handicap.
Shops, 75 to 90% of our people are multiply handicapped. And according to National Federation of the Blind's own philosophy, these people should be dealt with as physically handicapped, as diabetics, or retarded, or whatever, and they should be the responsibility of somebody else to rehabilitate them and find them employment and provide them employment. And this would be a real tragedy.
We believe that the society, as the rehab providing agency, should have a little bit more positive philosophy, emphasizing the limitations, but emphasizing the strengths and the alternative techniques that blind people can use.
Donna, I think what surprises a lot of people is the intensity of feeling between these 2 groups. They really dislike one another, don't they?
It's just a cut and dry major difference in philosophy, and it's something that has been going on for 8 years. And because, like I said, it's the major organization that represents blind people in Minnesota, whoever has control of that board is going to have control over what's going on in Minnesota for the blind.
Okay, November 14th is the important date, I guess, and I think we're going to hear more between now and then. Skip?
Thank you, Ron. In a moment, we'll go find Dan Carlson, who's enjoying some of that super weather, and find out if it'll continue. Every spring, Minnehaha Creek is one of the troubled areas for flooding in the Twin Cities, and this afternoon at Grays Bay in Minnetonka, groundbreaking was held for a new dam which should help control the flooding. It's part of an overall improvement project along the creek. It's being undertaken by the western suburbs and the city of Minneapolis. A major feature of the project, movable control gates to regulate the amount of water flowing from Grays Bay into Minnehaha Creek. The project will stabilize water levels of Lake Minnetonka and prolong the creek flowage for canoeing in summer months. The entire project, though, will take about 2 years to complete. Well, it has been an absolutely super day, and I see standing out and enjoying some of that weather rather than sitting in an old stuffy studios, Dan Carlson. You going to keep it up?
Well, Skip, unfortunately, it doesn't look like we're going to be graced with yet another pleasant day tomorrow. If we take a look at our current conditions right now, though, we have a temperature of 59 degrees Fahrenheit, and relative humidity is 46%. Winds are from the south at 8, barometric pressure 29.89 and rising, and the skies are partly cloudy. Now, we're forecasting then for tonight increasing cloudiness with a 30% chance of rain, a low of about 42 degrees, and tomorrow cloudy with an 80% chance of rain and a high in the upper 50s. Some of the people who ever lived in mountain areas in their lives are very familiar with a foehn or Chinook wind, but not many people understand the process about how this wind comes around. And to illustrate this, let us assume that we have an air mass with a temperature of 54 degrees Fahrenheit approaching a mountain range. To get to the other side, the air mass is forced up the windward side of the mountain, and as it rises, it is cooled at a rate of 1 degree centigrade for every 100 meters it rises, until finally the dew point is reached and condensation occurs. And if conditions are favorable, precipitation will fall. If this is above 0 degrees Fahrenheit, it will be rain, or if it's that's above centigrade, and if it's below centigrade, 0 degrees, it will snow on the mountain. It's important to notice that condensation is a heating process, and heat is released. Once the air gets over the mountain, the air mass begins to descend and warm up at the same rate, and because the air is depleted of its moisture, condensation does not occur and the air retains its original heat. As a result, you have a wind about 10 degrees warmer than the initial wind on the windward side of the mountain, and this is called the Chinook or foehn wind, or snow eater as the Indians used to call it. And Skip, I'll be back at 6 o'clock with that picture on our color satellite recorder of that intense winter storm you mentioned that will be affecting our weather in the next few days.
Okay, Tim, thank you. We'll be back in just a moment with an interview with one of the Minneapolis mayoral candidates.
Hi, I'm proud that my down is being featured at the First Banks. Save now on Stearns Down.
All of this week, the week before the Minneapolis city elections, we're going to devote a portion of the 5 p.m. report to interviews with one of the mayoral candidates discussing some of the major issues. The interviews were arranged in no particular order. Ron Handberg in the newsroom now with the first. Ronald?
Skip, the idea is to talk with all of the candidates at some length about their basic beliefs on the issues. Today we met with Charles Stenvig, chatting in the backyard of his South Minneapolis home. Stenvig, a policeman who has served 2 terms as mayor in the past, talked first about his plans for a public safety commission, one that would choose police and fire chiefs in the future.
There'd be 5 commissioners elected at staggered terms for 4-year terms, and in return they would appoint a director, permanent director, give him a 5-year term, non-voting, and executive secretary, I should say. And then in return, this commission would pick the chief of the police department, the fire department, and of civil defense, and they would give them 5-year terms. And this way, the people would have direct input into the public safety field, and they wouldn't have to go through the mayor or through the alderman, which I don't think the alderman or the mayor should be ahead of it.
Do you favor the downtown Dome Stadium in Minneapolis, and if so, under what conditions?
I think it'd be good for downtown, but I've said since 1972 under these conditions, and the newspaper has been printing them wrong on me. First, they should have the people should have a vote on it. Secondly, there should be a guarantee of full length of the bonds and full length of the contracts with the team. Also, there should be no property taxes used. The people that are going to use it should be the ones that are going to pay for it. And they should keep everything above board and let the people know what's going off. When I told them in 72 or 73 when I vetoed at that time, and it would have fallen back on the people at that time if I hadn't vetoed it, because it was under a park board regulation, and it would have been full faith of the city on the bonds. And the thing is, they haven't done all these, and they are using state aids on roads and so forth over there. We could use another place in the city. I think the people should have a vote, and they should be able to say if they want it or don't want it.
Do you think city property taxes can be reduced further, and if so, how would you do it?
Well, as I've always said, try and hold a line. I will never say that I can cut them. I will never say that I can hold them as one person, as a mayor. But we did a good job. We kept the bond improvement program the same millage for 4 years, and we did have reductions 1 or 2 years, I think it was. And when the council couldn't get together on it, I got the council and got the various boards together so we could save millions of dollars on the property tax. And the thing is, we can do more by efficiency and getting more efficiency out of the personnel in the city. And we expect people out there to live within a budget. I think it's about time that the government does. In fact, I was for this, way back before it was popular, Amendment 13 out in California.
Finally, why do you think you would make a better mayor than some of your opponents?
Well, I feel I have the experience, and 2 years isn't very long down there now. I have 6.5 years in as mayor. We have a proven record of leadership, of getting people together, and of trying to hold a line of property taxes. And we have an excellent in the law enforcement field, and excellent with all the people in different neighborhood groups. Even with the Cedar Riverside, with the Margaret Berry, the Berry Parkway, we help people. We've helped people all over the city, and I'm a very fiscal conservative as far as spending. I want dollar value, but I'm very liberal when it comes to environmental things. I think that we have to. We have to not have all these big, tall buildings. We have to limit it by zoning and so forth. And on the housing, we've done things in housing. Al Hofstad's had a couple programs. I've had a couple. And we have to keep going on that and get for the middle and lower middle class people, financially, I mean this, so we have to help them.
Tomorrow, Skip will talk with Tom McDonald, on Wednesday with Mike Barris, and on Friday with Don Fraser. Gail Swan, the Socialist Workers' Party candidate, I'm told, declined to be interviewed because of the strike situation here at WCCO.
Ron, did you by any chance get into a conversation with Stenvig about his campaign finances? Is he working with much money this time around?
Well, he estimates now that he will spend during the campaign somewhere between $35,000 and $40,000, including $10,000 of his own money. He took out another mortgage on his home. So he expects to end up about $40,000. He says, by the way, that he is a pessimist, but that he's feeling some optimism now. He's being outspent, but he feels confident.
Okay, he has lost the last 2 times out. We'll see whether he can make a comeback this time. We'll have sports with Dave Habish in just a moment.
Hello? Flip phone, a brand new phone you can own. A whole new look, a whole new sound. All in one electronic phone of the future. It's the smallest and the lightest around. See it on your table, what a sleek new style. Pick it up, it flips out, easy to dial. We said, flip phone, take it on home.
Flip out with a new GTE flip phone telephone. And here's where you can buy one right now.
When Karen was 1, I began to worry about tiny lines and wrinkles. And as she grew older, I didn't want to look any older than I was. Then I discovered the secret of Oil of Olay. Tropical oil and precious emollients help ease dryness that can accentuate tiny lines.
Looks like Billy Martin may now have changed his tune.
Certainly looks that way after what we heard today.
Well, tell us.
I will indeed. Confusion about the Billy Martin incident really does continue. Martin was fired as manager of the Yankees for an altercation he had had with another man in a Bloomington hotel. And at first, Martin claimed he didn't hit the man, but now sources close to owner George Steinbrenner say Martin admitted to Steinbrenner that he did throw a punch. Well, regardless, Martin's out of a job and was replaced by former Yankee coach Dick Hauser. And today, Commissioner Bowie Kuhn took one step backward for baseball. Kuhn forced former great Willie Mays to resign as coach of the New York Mets because Mays accepted a position with a gambling casino in Atlantic City. And although the position is strictly public relations, Kuhn felt that Mays' new job was incompatible with baseball. And instead of fighting the decision, Mays decided to accept the $100,000 a year casino offer. Minnesota's 12-10 loss yesterday to Tampa Bay put them 3 games back of the Buccaneers in the NFC Central Division. It was a particularly tough loss because the Vikes blew a 10-3 lead at the half and couldn't come back for the rest of the game. On the last play of the game, the Vikings opted to go for a touchdown instead of attempting an almost impossible 58-yard field goal. And after the game, wide receiver Ahmad Rashad talked about that desperation pass.
In a situation like that, there's very little strategy involved. What you do is everybody prays. You line up 3 guys on the outside of the field, and you run down and you get everybody in the area, and you have the quarterback just drop the ball in that area, and you hope it bounces around to one of your guys. In this situation, the ball bounced back up over my head.
Yeah, Sammy tipped it, didn't he?
No, one of their guys reached up and just batted as hard as he could back towards the other way. And he made an excellent play. I think what happens a lot of times, everybody goes up and tries to catch it, and then it's knocked loose, and then somebody can kind of catch it.
Yesterday in the NFL, injuries took their toll. Cleveland's Greg Pruitt and the Jets' Wesley Walker suffered knee injuries. Houston's running back Earl Campbell re-injured his thigh. And probably the team hit the hardest, though, were the Miami Dolphins. Delvin Williams cracked a couple of ribs. Norm Bullock broke his jaw. And veteran center Jim Langer's knee injury may require surgery. And the Vikings, however, got away with just a few minor bumps and bruises. And the Minnesota North Stars' home record remained a perfect 4-0 after their 7-2 win over the Rangers Saturday night. The North Stars take to the road this Wednesday. They'll face the Detroit Red Wings on Halloween.
Okay, and we will take to the newsroom right now to find out what's coming up at 6. Ron?
Well, Skip, one thing we'll talk about is a continuing shortage of rock salt in the area, a shortage that is posing some real problems in western Wisconsin and elsewhere, as you know. And we'll have a report on the continuing controversy over in Shakopee over the chemicals PCBs at 6, Skip.
Okay, in the national and international news scene, anti-nuclear protesters had little effect on the workings of the financial community on Wall Street today. Senator Edward Kennedy will formally announce his presidential candidacy November 7th. President Carter carried his windfall profits tax to Rhode Island today. For more on that story and others, we go to Walter Cronkite with the CBS Evening News in New York.
This is the CBS Evening News with Walter Cronkite.
Good evening. After months of being a